Illustration by Eddie Alvarez. The Washington Post. Photos by Jahi Chikwendy. Washington Post. U.S. Senate D and Istock. In April 2016, at the height of the deadliest drug epidemic in U.S. history, Congress effectively stripped the Drug Enforcement Administration of its most potent weapon against large drug companies suspected of spilling prescription narcotics onto the nation's streets. By then, the opioid war had claimed 200,000 lives, more than 3 times the number of U.S. military deaths in the Vietnam War. Overdose deaths continue to rise. There is no end in sight. A handful of members of Congress, allied with the nation's major drug distributors, prevailed upon the D and the Justice Department to agree to a more industry-friendly law, undermining efforts to staunch the flow of pain pills, according to an investigation by The Washington Post and 60 Minutes. The D had opposed the effort for years. The law was the multifaceted campaign by the drug industry to weaken aggressive de-enforcement efforts against drug distribution companies that were supplying corrupt doctors and pharmacists who peddled narcotics to the black market. The industry worked behind the scenes with lobbyists and key members of Congress, pouring more than $1 million into their election campaigns. The chief advocate of the law that hobbled the D was Rep. Tom Marino. Rep. Tom Marino. RPA. Congress donations received from industry. 2013 June 2017 $92,500. President Trump's nominee to be drugs czar sponsored the Ensuring Patient Access and Effective Drug Enforcement Act, a Pennsylvania Republican who is now President Trump's nominee to become the nation's next drug czar. Marino spent years trying to move the law through Congress. It passed after Sen. Orrin G. Hatchison. Orrin Hatch. Root. Congress donations received from industry. 2013 June 2017 $177,000. The longest-serving Republican senator, considered a staunch ally of the pharmaceutical industry. He sponsored the Senate version of the bill. Root. Negotiated a final version with the D. As Rep. Tom Marino's Pennsylvania district was reeling from the opioid crisis, he sponsored a bill that undermined the Drug Enforcement Administration's efforts to stop the flow of pain pills. Alice Ludd. Washington Post. For years, some drug distributors were fined for repeatedly ignoring warnings from the D to shut down suspicious sales of hundreds of millions of pills, while they racked up billions of dollars in sales. The new law makes it virtually impossible for the D to freeze suspicious narcotic shipments from the companies, according to internal agency and Justice Department documents and an independent assessment by the DE's chief administrative law judge in a soon-to-be-published law review article. That powerful tool had allowed the agency to immediately prevent drugs from reaching. Political action committees representing the industry contributed at least $1.5 million to the 23 lawmakers who sponsored or co-sponsored 4 versions of the bill, including nearly $100,000 to Marino and $177,000 to Hatch. Overall, the drug industry spent $102 million lobbying Congress on the bill and other legislation between 2014 and 2016, according to lobbying reports. Tuesday update. Trump announces drug czar Marino will withdraw. The drug industry, the manufacturers, wholesalers, distributors and chain drugstores, have an influence over Congress that has never been seen before, said Joseph D. Ranazisi. Joseph D. Ranazisi, former chief of the DE's Office of Diversion Control. He is now a consultant to lawyers suing drug companies, who ran the DE's division responsible for regulating the drug industry and led a decade-long campaign of aggressive enforcement until he was forced out of the agency in 2015. I mean, to get Congress to pass a bill to protect their interests in the height of an opioid epidemic just shows me how much influence they have. Besides the sponsors and co-sponsors of the bill, few lawmakers knew the true impact the law would have. It sailed through Congress and was passed by unanimous consent, a parliamentary procedure reserved for bills considered to be non-controversial. The White House was equally unaware of the bill's import when President Barack Obama signed it into law, according to interviews with former senior administration officials. Top officials at the White House and the Justice Department have declined to discuss how the bill came to pass. Lobbying expenses. 20,142,016 groups reported lobbying expenditures of more than $102 million related to the Ensuring Patient Access and Effective Drug Enforcement Act and other bills. Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers of America, National Association of Chain Drugstores, National Community Pharmacists Association, Healthcare Distribution Alliance includes lobbying efforts of more than $5,000. Source: U.S. Senate Lobbying Disclosure Electronic Filing System. Lobbying expenses: $20,142,016. Groups reported lobbying expenditures of more than $102 million related to the Ensuring Patient Access and Effective Drug Enforcement Act and other bills. Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers of America, National Association of Chain Drugstores, National Community Pharmacists Association, Healthcare Distribution Alliance includes lobbying efforts of more than $5,000. Source: U.S. Senate Lobbying Disclosure Electronic Filing System. Michael Botticelli, who led the White House Office of National Drug Control Policy at the time, said neither Justice nor the D objected to the bill, removing a major obstacle to the president's approval. "We deferred to D, as is common practice," he said. The bill also was reviewed by the White House Office of Management and Budget. Neither the D nor the Justice Department informed OMB about the policy change in the bill, a former senior OMB official with knowledge of the issue said recently. The official spoke on the condition of anonymity because of the sensitivity of internal White House deliberations. The desktop official at the time, Acting Administrator Chuck Rosenberg. Former D. Acting Administrator Chuck Rosenberg, D. Former Chief of Staff for the NFB Director James B. Comey, and former U.S. Attorney in Virginia and Texas before he was appointed to head the D in 2015. He resigned October 1, declined repeated requests for interviews. A senior D official said the agency fought the bill for years in the face of growing pressure from key members of Congress and industry lobbyists. But the D lost the battle and eventually was forced to accept a deal it did not want. "They would have passed this with us or without us," said the official, who spoke on the condition of anonymity. "Our point was that this law was completely unnecessary." Loretta E. Lynch, who was Attorney General at the time, declined a recent interview request. Obama also declined to discuss the law. His spokeswoman, Katie Hill, referred reporters to Botticelli's statement. The D and Justice Department have denied or delayed more than a dozen requests filed by the Post and 60 Minutes under the Freedom of Information Act for public records that might shed additional light on the matter. Some of those requests have been pending for nearly 18 months. The Post is now suing the Justice Department in federal court for some of those records. Hatcher's spokesman, Matt Whitlock, said the D, which had undergone a leadership change, did not oppose the bill in the end. "We worked collaboratively with D and DOJ, and they contributed significantly to the language of the bill," Whitlock wrote in an email. D had plenty of opportunities to stop the bill and they did not do so. Marino declined repeated requests for comment. Marino's staff called the U.S. Capitol Police when the Post and 60 Minutes tried to interview the congressman at his office on September 12. In the past, the congressman has said the D was too aggressive and needed to work more collaboratively with drug companies. Drug industry officials and experts blame the origins of the opioid crisis on the overprescribing of pain pills by doctors. The industry notes that the D approves the total amount of opioids produced each year. Industry officials defended the new law as an effort to ensure that legitimate pain patients receive the medication without disruption. The industry had long complained that federal prescription drug laws were too vague about the responsibility of companies to report suspicious orders of narcotics. The industry also complained that the D communicated poorly with companies, citing a 2015 report by the Government Accountability Office, and was too punitive when narcotics were diverted out of the legal drug distribution chain. "To be clear, this law does not decrease enforcement against distributors," said John Parker, a spokesman for the Healthcare Distribution Alliance, which represents drug distributors. "It supports real-time communication between all parties in order to counter the constantly evolving methods of drug diversion." But D Chief Administrative Law Judge John J. Mulrooney, IIDEA Chief Administrative Law Judge John J. Mulrooney, DOJ head of the D Administrative Court that handles pharmaceutical cases, he read the Law Review article sharply critical of the new law, has reached the opposite conclusion. At a time when, by all accounts, opioid abuse, addiction and deaths were increasing markedly, the new law imposed a dramatic diminution of the agency's authority, Mulrooney wrote in a draft 115-page article provided by the Marquette Law Review editorial board. He wrote that it is now all but logically impossible for the D to suspend a drug company's operations for failing to comply with federal law. The agency declined to make Mulrooney available for an interview. Barber provided a critical connection between D leadership, Congress, and the pharmaceutical industry. Congress DEA-DOJ. April 2006, Barber named top lawyer for the DES Office of Diversion Control. 20,062,007. R-Wis and Barber launch a crackdown on drug distributors. September 2011. After Marino introduces a third version of his bill, Congress holds a hearing. Barber testifies in favor of the legislation. February 18, 2014. Rep. Tom Marino introduces the first version of the Ensuring Patient Access and Effective Drug Enforcement Act. June 4, 2014. An email from a Justice Legislative Affairs officer says that the Marino bill was written by Barber. January 27, 2015. After Marino introduces a third version of his bill, Congress holds a hearing. Barber is the featured witness testifying in favor of the legislation. April 19, 2016. President Obama signs the bill into law. July 2017. Barber joins Cardinal Health as a senior vice president in charge of regulatory affairs. Deeply involved in the effort to help the industry was the DES former associate chief counsel, D. Lyndon Barber. D. Lyndon Barber, a lobby pharma D lawyer who supervised cases against pharmaceutical companies. He left the agency and is now an executive at Cardinal Health. While at the D, he helped design and carry out the early stages of the agency's tough enforcement campaign, which targeted drug companies that were failing to report suspicious orders of narcotics. When Barber went to work for the drug industry in 2011, he brought an intimate knowledge of the DES strategy and how it could be attacked to protect the companies. He was one of dozens, if D officials recruited by the drug industry during the past decade. Barber played a key role in crafting an early version of the legislation that would eventually curtail the DES power, according to an internal email written by a Justice Department official to a colleague. He wrote the Marino bill, the official wrote in 2014. Barber declined repeated requests for an interview. With a few words, the new law changed 4 decades of D practice. Previously, the D could freeze drug shipments that posed an imminent danger to the community, giving the agency broad authority. Now, the D must demonstrate that a company's actions represent a substantial likelihood of an immediate threat, a much higher bar. There's no way that we could meet that burden, the determination that those drugs are going to be an immediate threat, because immediate by definition means right now, R-Wis said. Today, R-Wis is a consultant for a team of lawyers suing the opioid industry. Separately, 41 state attorneys general have banded together to investigate the industry. Hundreds of counties, cities and towns also are suing. This is an industry that's out of control. If they don't follow the law in drug supply and diversion occurs, people die. That's just it, people die, he said. And what they're saying is, the heck with your compliance. Well, just get the law changed. Illustration by Eddie Alvarez. The Washington Post. Photos by Jahi Chakwendy. The Washington Post. J. Laprit. Bloomberg News. Danny Johnston. Drug dealers in lab coats. 2006. 52,277 deaths from prescription opioid overdoses since 2000. Joe R-Wis. Joseph D. R-Wis, a death former chief of the DES Office of Diversion Control. He is now a consultant, a lawyer suing drug companies, came to D headquarters as an outsider with an attitude. He worked as an agent in Detroit, where he watched prescription drugs flood small towns and cities in the Midwest. Hundreds of millions of pain pills, such as Vicodin and oxycodone, ended up in the hands of dealers and illegal users. Prescriptions for enormous numbers of pills, and complicit pharmacists filled them without question, often for cash. Internet pharmacies, supplied by drug distribution companies, allowed users to obtain drugs without seeing a doctor. There were just too many bad practitioners, too many bad pharmacies, and too many bad wholesalers and distributors, R-Wis recalled. R-Wis, a burly, tall-talking Long Islander, was assigned to head the DES Office of Diversion Control. He had a law degree, a pharmacy degree, and had spent years navigating the DES bureaucracy. The office was seen as a backwater operation whose 600 investigators had toiled for years over prescription drug cases with little or none of the recognition that went to those who investigated illegal street drugs like heroin or cocaine. R-Wis brought an aggressive approach to the Diversion Control Office. The year he took over at Lyndon Barberd, a lobby pharmacy lawyer who supervised cases against pharmaceutical companies, he left the agency and is now an executive at Cardinal Health, was promoted to run Diversion Control's litigation office, which crafted the legal arguments that supported the team. He was a former Army lawyer who served in Iraq. The cadre of attorneys who worked for him saw him as a tough litigator unafraid of an influential industry. Barber and R-Wis formed a powerful combination that the drug companies would learn to fear. Early on he did really good work, R-Wis said. He jumped into the internet cases when he first came here. After shutting down the internet pharmacies, R-Wis and Barber pursued the pain management clinics that replaced them, and soon became as ubiquitous in South Florida as the Golden Arches of McDonald's. To get there at drug dealers and take the Oxy Express down 75 lines of customers coming in and going out, said Matthew Murphy. Matt in Murphy, the former chief of pharmaceutical investigations under R-Wis. He now works as a consultant to the drug industry, a veteran D supervisor in Boston, whom R-Wis hired to be chief of pharmaceutical investigations. Armed guards, vanloads of people from the Appalachia region driving down to Florida to get a prescription from a pain clinic and then get the prescription filled, going back to wherever they're from. Back home, each 30-pill vial of oxycodone was worth $900. The officials realized they needed a new strategy to confront this new kind of drug dealer. They weren't slinging crack on the corner, R-Wis said. These were professionals who were doing it. They were just drug dealers in lab coats. Joseph D. R-Wis, seen here in September, ran the DUS division responsible for regulating the drug industry and led a decade-long campaign of aggressive enforcement until he was forced out of the agency in 2015. Jahicakwendi of Washington Post. Rather than focusing on bad doctors and pharmacists, R-Wis and Barber decided to target the companies feeding the pill mills, the wholesale drug distributors, some of the massive multinational corporations. I developed a legal framework to pursue actions against distributors, Barber would later say. We initiated a record number of administrative actions. The government collected record-setting civil penalties. Under the Controlled Substances Act of 1970, drug companies are required to report unusually large or otherwise suspicious orders. Failure to do so can result in fines and the suspension or loss of registrations to manufacture or distribute narcotics. When the D suspected that a company was ignoring suspicious sales, the agency filed an order to show cause. That gave a company at least 30 days to explain why the agency should not revoke its registration. In the most egregious cases, the D employed an immediate suspension order, allowing the agency to lock up a distributor's drugs. The orders instantly halted all commerce in controlled substances on the grounds that the drugs constituted an imminent danger to the community. Under R-Wis in the mid-2000s, the D repeatedly warned the companies that they were shipping unusually large volumes of opioids to customers around the country. Despite the warnings, some companies continued the shipments. The D soon began bringing enforcement actions against distributors. In 2007, the agency moved against McKesson, the nation's largest drug distributor and the fifth largest corporation in the nation, for failing to report hundreds of suspicious orders placed by internet pharmacies. McKesson settled the case, paying a $13.2 million fine. Cardinal Health Inc. paid a $34 million fine after the D brought a case in 2008 that claimed the company filled blatantly suspicious orders from online drugstores. Gary Gardner, Bloomberg News. In 2007, the agency took action against McKesson, the nation's largest drug distributor, for failure to report hundreds of suspicious orders. The company paid $13.2 million. Justin Sullivan, Getty Images. In 2008, R-Wis and Barber targeted Cardinal Health, another large drug distributor, for filling blatantly suspicious orders from online drugstores. Cardinal paid a $34 million fine. The D would ultimately bring at least 17 cases against 13 drug distributors and one manufacturer. The government said it assessed nearly $425 million in fines over a decade. Those fines reflect only a small portion of the hundreds of billions of dollars in revenue the companies receive each year. It's a cost of doing business. Murphy, Matt in Murphy, the former chief of D. pharmaceutical investigations under R-Wis. He now works as a consultant to the drug industry, said. Along the way, R-Wis was making powerful enemies in the industry. They definitely didn't like Joe R-Wis, Murphy said. Not at all. He wasn't viewed as a person that they could work with. And maybe that was appropriate. He didn't want to work with industry much. R-Wis was unmoved by the complaints. We're worried about the feelings being hurt because we were doing our job, he said. We were making them comply. We were holding the feet to the fire. Murphy recalled a telemeeting with drug company representatives. He said the president of one of the drug companies sat on the other side of the table, put his hands up and said, "You got us. What can we do to make this right?" Murphy recalled. Murphy said he had heard the same thing from drug dealers. There was an important difference, Murphy noted. You know, he said, the heroin and cocaine traffickers didn't have a class ring on their finger from a prestigious university. Illustration by Eddie Alvarez. The Washington Post. Photo from U.S. Senate. This is war. 2011. 121,468 deaths from prescription opioid overdoses since 2000. In 2011, Lyndon Barberd, a lobby pharma lawyer who supervised cases against pharmaceutical companies, he left the agency and is now an executive at Cardinal Health, left the D to join the Washington, D.C. office of the law firm Quarles Brady. He started a practice representing drug companies. If you have a D compliance issue, you're facing a government investigation, he said in a promotional video for the firm. He'd be happy to hear from you. Barber's move turned out to be a key moment in the struggle between drug companies and the government, but it was far from the only one. Dozens of top officials from the D and Justice Department have stepped through Washington's revolving door to work for drug companies. Two former U.S. Deputy Attorneys General have defended Cardinal, one of the big three companies, along with McKesson and AmerisourceBergen, that together control 85% of drug distribution in the United States. Jamie Gorelick, an attorney for Wilmer Harley, was Deputy Attorney General under President Bill Clinton. Craig S. Morford, Cardinal's Chief Legal and Compliance Officer, was Acting Deputy Attorney General under President George W. Bush. As R-Wis investigators increased their pressure, those lawyers began to contact their former colleagues in government. At least 56 D and Justice officials went to work for the pharmaceutical industry. Pharmaceutical companies and the law firms that represent them hired at least 56 former officials since 2000. Jamie Gorelick joins Wilmer Harley. D begins crackdown on opioid industry. D brings cases against Cardinal, CVS, Walgreens. Efforts to pass Marino bill. Note the dates of hire for 5 former D employees could not be specifically determined, as such they are not included in this graphic. At least 56 D and Justice officials went to work for the pharmaceutical industry. Pharmaceutical companies and the law firms that represent them hired at least 56 former officials since 2000. Craig S. Morford, a former acting Deputy Attorney General, joins Cardinal Health. D. Lyndon Barber joins Quarles Brady. Jamie Gorelick, former U.S. Deputy Attorney General, joins Wilmer Harley. D brings cases against Cardinal, CVS and Walgreens. Effort to pass Ensuring Patient Access and Effective Drug Enforcement Act. D begins crackdown on opioid industry. Note the dates of hire for 5 former D employees could not be specifically determined, as such they are not included in this graphic. At least 56 D and Justice officials went to work for the pharmaceutical industry. Pharmaceutical companies and the law firms that represent them hired at least 56 former officials since 2000. Craig S. Morford, a former acting Deputy Attorney General, joins Cardinal Health. D. Lyndon Barber joins Quarles Brady. Jamie Gorelick, former U.S. Deputy Attorney General, joins Wilmer Harley. D brings cases against Cardinal, CVS and Walgreens. D begins crackdown on opioid industry. Effort to pass Ensuring Patient Access and Effective Drug Enforcement Act. Note the dates of hire for 5 former D employees could not be specifically determined, as such they are not included in this graphic. In late 2011, Morford went over R-Wis's head to then-D Administrator Michelle Leonhardt at the agency again investigated Cardinal, which had sent millions of doses of oxycodone to a small number of pharmacies in Florida, including 2 CVS stores in Sanford. Michelle Morford wrote to Leonhardt in October 2011, "We are committed to working with D to address the challenging problem of diversion and welcome the opportunity to meet with you and your team to address these issues in a non-adversarial way." He signed the handwritten note. Craig Gorlick said in an email that she wrote to then Deputy Attorney General James M. Cole to ask that my client be afforded due process. Morford did not respond to requests for comment. Around Thanksgiving, R-Wis said he received a call about the Cardinals case from James H. Dinan, then chief of the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force's program at the Justice Department. R-Wis said Dinan told him, "We're getting calls from attorneys, former justice people, that are saying you guys are doing some enforcement action." R-Wis ramps up crackdown on drug industry. Congress DEA DOJ lobby industry. January 2006, R-Wis is promoted to run the DES Office of Diversion Control. 20,060 2007, R-Wis and Barber launch a crackdown on drug distributors. 2007, the D files an enforcement action against McKesson Corp., the nation's largest drug distributor. 2007, the D accuses Cardinal Health of failing to report blatantly suspicious narcotics orders. October 26, 2011, the D targets Cardinal Health again, saying company posed an imminent danger to the public health and safety. September 2012, the D suspends Walgreens narcotics shipments from a Florida warehouse. August 2013, D supervisor Jim Geldof tries to take an enforcement action against drug distributor Miami Lucan. His efforts are stalled by lawyers at D headquarters. July 2, 2014, R-Wis holds a contentious conference call with congressional staffers. 4 months later, R-Wis received a late-night call from Dinan summoning him to appear at Justice headquarters early the next morning to explain his actions in the Cardinals case. Cole, "Please call me in the morning," Dinan wrote, according to R-Wis. "I want to make double sure nothing unreversible happens before Cole is briefed." R-Wis was stunned. He had brought hundreds of these cases and he had never been called to brief Cole, the second most powerful law enforcement official in the country. The meeting quickly spiraled out of control, R-Wis said. It was adversarial to say the least. R-Wis believed the message was clear: back off. Cole, now a lawyer in private practice, said he was not trying to pressure R-Wis. Hearing what Cardinal had to say could inform D of facts they may not have known, Cole said in a statement. "I did not tell Mr. R-Wis how to come out on the Cardinal matter and certainly did not discourage him from going after any company in violation of any statutes or regulations," he said. Either way, R-Wis was defiant when he returned to the office from the Justice Department and sat down with his staff. "Now this is war," he recalled telling them. "We're going after these people, and we're not going to stop. We're just going to continue to move forward. And we don't really give a damn anymore what the department wants." Illustration by Eddie Alvarez. The Washington Post. Photos by Karen Bly. Getty Images. Matt McClan. The Washington Post. Nick Hagen for The Washington Post. It was bad. 2013, 149,853 deaths from prescription opioid overdoses since 2000. The field generals in the death war on opioids are men and women such as Jim Geldof. Jim Geldof, former program manager of the DES Diversion Control Office in Detroit. He retired in 2015 and works as a consultant to lawyers suing drug companies, a 43-year agency veteran who managed the diversion control program in the Detroit field office. He witnessed firsthand the heartbreak pain pills were causing across the Midwest. One night, at a town hall meeting in Portsmouth, Ohio, Geldof sat quietly as the Portsmouth High School gym fell dark and a large screen flickered with photographs. Geldof was in tears. Sons and daughters and grandsons and granddaughters in graduation pictures, he recalled. Some were wearing football jerseys. They had their whole lives ahead of them, and then they were gone. The annual number of prescription drug overdose deaths has more than quadrupled since 2000. Natural and semi-synthetic opioid analgesics and methadone. Source: Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The annual number of prescription drug overdose deaths has more than quadrupled since 2000. Natural and semi-synthetic opioid analgesics and methadone. Source: Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The families always asked what was the D doing to stop the flow of drugs. By 2013, it had become increasingly difficult to answer that question. Cases were languishing at headquarters. At first, Geldhof wasn't sure why. Behind the scenes, a major shift was taking place at D headquarters. An appeals court in Washington, D.C., had been reviewing a case that R-Wis Joseph D. R-Wis, a death former chief of the DES Office of Diversion Control. He is now a consultant to lawyers suing drug companies. Investigators brought against Walgreens, alleging that some of its pharmacies in Florida were selling more than 1 million pain pills a year. A typical pharmacy sold 74,000. The D had used an immediate suspension order against Walgreens, arguing that the drug sales constituted an imminent danger to the community. The D moved to shutter a large Walgreens distribution center in Jupiter, Florida, that supplied nearly 1,000 pharmacies along the East Coast. Walgreens fought back. The company's attorney, Gregory G. Garrett, the former U.S. Solicitor General during the second Bush administration, argued the imminent danger standard was vague and not supported by law. The original 1970 Act did not define imminent danger. Judges on the appellate panel voiced similar concerns during oral arguments. No one knew how the appeals court would rule, but Lyndon Barberd, a lobby pharmacy D lawyer who supervised cases against pharmaceutical companies, he left the agency and is now an executive at Cardinal Health, had argued while he was still at the D that the vague standard could cripple the cases the agency was building. Now Barber and other industry lawyers were making that argument on behalf of the clients. The position was common knowledge in the diversion legal office, and it resonated with Clifford Lee Reeves too, a career justice attorney who had recently taken the job Barber once held, according to Jonathan P. Novak. Jonathan P. Novak, Dr. former attorney for the D on drug diversion cases, he is now in private practice, a lawyer who worked in the office. The departure of so many D employees for the drug industry gave the distributors an unfair advantage, said Jonathan P. Novak, formerly a D lawyer. There was a fear, he said. It comes from seeing that some of the best and brightest former D attorneys are now on the other side and know all of the weak points. Bonnie Jo and the Washington Post. Lee kept trying to shut us down, said Novak, now in private practice. He kept telling us about the Walgreens case and the imminent danger standard and that we were going to lose all of our cases and we didn't have enough information to go forward. The D declined to make Reeves available for an interview. R-Wis, a lawyer himself, told the D attorneys that the law was on their side. I said, stop worrying. We have never lost an imminent danger case, he said. The warnings by Barber and other industry lawyers divided the 15 attorneys in Diversion Control's legal office. Lyndon carried a lot of weight, and people listened to what he had to say, Novak said. He knew all the arguments. He had the clout. He was the big gun. He put the fear of God into people. Frank Yunker, the former supervisor of the DES Diversion Control Office in Cincinnati. He retired in 2014. A D supervisor in the Cincinnati field office and 30-year veteran of the agency, said the legal office began demanding more evidence from investigators. Starting in 2013, shortly after the Walgreens case was argued and Reeves arrived, investigators felt they were now required to establish that their evidence was beyond a reasonable doubt. Previously, investigators had to show only a preponderance of evidence. We had years of very aggressive enforcement, said Yunker, who retired in 2014. It was like we were in a Porsche and all of a sudden, someone hit the brakes. Declining suspension orders. The number of immediate suspension orders against doctors, pharmacies and drug companies has plummeted since fiscal year 2011. 65 immediate suspension orders. Source: Drug Enforcement Administration. Declining suspension orders. The number of immediate suspension orders against doctors, pharmacies and drug companies has plummeted since fiscal year 2011. 65 immediate suspension orders. Source: Drug Enforcement Administration. D officials later said the standards did not change. Novak, Jonathan P. Novak, Dr. former attorney for the D on drug diversion cases, he is now in private practice, said Reeves, and his second-in-command, Jason Hadges, also required investigators to transcribe their interviews and hire high-priced expert witnesses, even though there was no budget for them. Novak said it seemed like there was never enough evidence to please his bosses. He said they would ask, maybe we need an expert to explain how recording equipment works, maybe we need an expert to explain the system for prescribing. It felt, honestly, confusing and almost insane. The delays cost months, sometimes years. Geldhoff. Jim Geldhody, former program manager of the Desk Diversion Control Office in Detroit. He retired in 2015 and works as a consultant to lawyers suing drug companies. The D program manager in Detroit was investigating a mid-size Ohio-based drug distributor. Between 2007 and 2012, Miami Lucan had shipped 20 million doses of oxycodone and hydrocodone to pharmacies in West Virginia. About 11 million wound up in one county, Mingard, population 25,000. Despite the rising death rate in West Virginia, the highest in the nation, Geldhoff said his pleas in 2013 to halt Miami Lucan's operations were ignored by the legal office at headquarters. First we got blown off by the company, he said, and then we got blown off by our own lawyers. Novak suspected another reason from the slowdown. At times, he said, some of his colleagues appeared more concerned with pleasing the industry than working on behalf of the public. Some of the lawyers had simply given up fighting the industry and seemed to be preparing for a future working with the companies they were supposed to be regulating, he said. It was not just one person who left the office, everyone started to leave. That's your payout. You do your time, and more people were auditioning for the industry. It stopped us from doing our jobs. The departures gave the industry an unfair advantage, Novak said. There was a fear, he said. It comes from seeing that some of the best and brightest former D attorneys are now on the other side and know all of the weak points. The fingerprints are on memos and policy and emails. Illustration by Eddie Alvarez. The Washington Post. Photo by Mark Wilson. Getty Images. The Lawmakers. 2014. 164,691 deaths from prescription opioid overdoses since 2000. The major drug companies also brought their campaign to Capitol Hill. One of their key allies was Tom Marino. Rep. Tom Marino, RPA. Congress donations received from industry. 2013 June 2017 $92,500. President Trump's nominee to be drug czar sponsored the Ensuring Patient Access and Effective Drug Enforcement Act, then a 12-term Republican congressman from Williamsport, PA. Marino was a former county and federal prosecutor with deep hometown ties to a district that was reeling from the opioid epidemic. On February 18, 2014, Marino introduced the Ensuring Patient Access and Effective Drug Enforcement Act, making an effort to define what constitutes imminent danger. The proposal raised the death standard for suspending drug shipments by requiring that the agency establish a significant and present risk of death or serious bodily harm that is more likely than not to occur. Rep. Tom Marino, drug czar nominee and the opioid industry's advocate in Congress. It attracted 14 Republican co-sponsors, chief among them Rep. Marsha Blackburn. Rep. Marsha Blackburn, R. Tennessee. Congress donations received from industry. 2013 June 2017 $120,000. Co-sponsored all three versions of the Marino bill in the House, and asked for a Justice Department investigation into who ran as EC. R. Tennessee, also from a region in the grip of the epidemic. The D mobilized to defeat Marino's measure. One internal D memo obtained by the Post and 60 Minutes noted that the bill essentially eliminates the agency's power to file immediate suspension orders of drug shipments. The new law is fixing a problem that doesn't need fixing, a D official wrote. U.S. Rep. Tom Marino, RPA, left, was the chief advocate of the law that weakened the DES enforcement abilities. Seen with Rep. Trey Gowdy, RSC. In 2015, Marino is President Trump's nominee to become the nation's drug czar. Andrew Harry. Bloomberg. On April 8, 2014, with the bill stalled, Marino confronted the nation's top law enforcement officer, Attorney General Eric H. Holder, Jr., during a House Judiciary Committee hearing. Marino told Holder the D was treating the companies like illicit narcotics cartels. This mindset, it's extremely dangerous to legitimate business, Marino said. He told Holder that he wanted the Justice Department to meet with industry executives. When Marino wrote to Holder 3 weeks later urging him to set up the meeting, the congressman added a handwritten note: "It would be great to work together on this, Tom." Within the D and the Justice Department, Marino's overtures to Holder set off alarms. On May 7, 2014, Matthew Strait, the DES congressional liaison officer, detailed ways to push back on Marino's bill, according to an email he wrote. It was followed by a flurry of memos. One said, "This bill is without basis in case law or congressional findings." Another said the bill would constitute perhaps the greatest reduction in the Attorney General's authority under the Controlled Substances Act since the Act's passage in 1970. Later in May, Marino introduced a second version of his bill, with slightly altered language. Blackburn Rep. Marsha Blackburn, R. Tennessee. Congress donations received from industry, 2013 June 2017 $120,000 co-sponsored all three versions of the Marino bill in the House, and asked for a Justice Department investigation into R-Wis, was again a co-sponsor, but this time two Democrats were on board. Rep. Peter Welch. Rep. Peter Welch, DVT. Congress donations received from industry, 2013 June 2017 $81,000 co-sponsored the second version of the Marino bill in the House of Vermont, and Rep. Judy Chu. Rep. Judy Chu, DK. Congress donations received from industry, 2013 June 2017 $26,000 co-sponsored the second version of the Marino bill in the House of California. On June 4, Bill Ty, Marino's chief of staff, wrote to Peter Kadzik, Justice's top congressional liaison officer, thanking him for setting up a meeting with the industry executives. Ty asked Kadzik to coordinate with the industry's point person Lyndon Barber. Lyndon Barber, a lobby pharma lawyer who supervised cases against pharmaceutical companies. He left the agency and is now an executive at Cardinal Health. Kadzik wrote to a colleague at Justice about Barber. Lyndon Barber used to work for Jill Wade Tyson, another Justice congressional liaison officer, responded in an email. He wrote the Marino bill. Illustration by Eddie Alvarez. The Washington Post. Photo by Manuel Balchesentapo. Crap. Through the summer of 2014, as the fight over the second Marino bill unfolded, the congressman and other lawmakers pressed for a meeting with the D to understand why R-Wis. Joseph D. R-Wis, a death former chief of the DES Office of Diversion Control, he is now a consultant to lawyers suing drug companies, was so opposed. Congressional staff has set a conference call for July 2. R-Wis' relationship with the Hill was already frayed, and his disdain for diplomacy had become legendary. His aides advised him against joining the call. R-Wis ignored them. At first, the conversation was cordial. R-Wis and D officials discussed the legislation with staffers from the Judiciary and the Energy and Commerce committees. But the tone soon turned testy. One D official asked why the law was necessary. Drug industry pushes back. Congress DEA-DOJ lobby industry. November 24, 2011. R-Wis learns that former justice lawyers now representing the drug industry are calling his bosses about his enforcement actions. February 2, 2012. R-Wis says he is summoned to Deputy Attorney General James Cole's office to explain his actions against Cardinal. 2013. Between 2013 and June 2017, drug industry groups donate some $1.5 million to members of Congress. March 2013. D.C. Appeals Court questions the legality of the DES suspension orders against Walgreens. August 2013. D. Supervisor Jim Geldof tries to take an enforcement action against drug distributor Miami Lucan. His efforts are stalled by lawyers at D headquarters. April 8, 2014. Marino asks then Attorney General Eric H. Holder to meet with the drug companies. July 2, 2014. R-Wis holds a contentious conference call with congressional staffers. September 25, 2014. Marino and a co-sponsor of his bill, Rep. Marsha Blackburn, demand an investigation into R-Wis for trying to intimidate the United States Congress. October 2015. R-Wis announces his retirement from the D. April 19, 2016. President Obama signs the bill into law. June 22, 2016. Hatch thanks new D administrator Chuck Rosenberg for his efforts to improve the DES relationship with the drug industry. Rosenberg calls the drug companies our allies. A congressional staffer responded, "We're just trying to create a better relationship between industry and D." R-Wis blew up. "You'll be protecting criminals," one participant recalled R-Wis saying. Eric Akers, another D liaison to Congress, was stunned. "As soon as he said it, I said, 'Oh crap,'" recalled Akers, who also was on the line. It was about as undiplomatic as you could be. I don't think he meant it as a threat. But any chance of salvaging the relationship with Congress just got immensely harder. The congressional staffers were furious. We can work with you, one told the D. R-Wis refused to meet with the industry executives, saying it would be improper because many of the drug companies were under active de-investigation or in settlement negotiations with the Justice Department. Joe R-Wis, the D-man who fought the drug companies and lost on July 29, the Marino bill passed the House and went to the Senate. The Justice Department was so concerned that it took the unusual step of having Attorney General Holder publicly oppose the bill. A recently passed House bill would severely undermine a critical component of our efforts to prevent communities and families from falling prey to dangerous drugs, Holder said in a July 31 news release. The bill stalled in the Senate. On September 18, during a congressional hearing, Marino complained to Leonhardt, the D administrator, about R-Wis's comments on the conference call. It is my understanding that Joe R-Wis, a senior D official, has publicly accused we sponsors of the bill of, quote, supporting criminals, unquote, Marino told her. This offends me immensely. A week later, Marino and Blackburn accused R-Wis of trying to intimidate the United States Congress and asked the Justice Department's Inspector General to investigate. R-Wis said he never said the bill would protect criminals. I said that this bill is going to protect defendants that we have under investigation, he said in a recent interview. And if they don't like the truth, well, I don't know what to tell them. Illustration by Eddie Alvarez. The Washington Post. Photo by Melina Marath. Washington Post. A new law 2015. 179,972 deaths from prescription opioid overdoses since 2000. With R-Wis under attack, the industry effort gained momentum. Marino Rep. Tom Marino RPA. Congress donations received from industry, 2013 June 2017 $92,500. President Trump's nominee to be drug czar sponsored the Ensuring Patient Access and Effective Drug Enforcement Act, introduced yet another version of his bill in the House on January 22, 2015. He announced that the Energy and Commerce Committee would hold a hearing 5 days later. One of the witnesses was Lyndon Barber. D. Lyndon Barber, a lobby pharma D lawyer who supervised cases against pharmaceutical companies. He left the agency and is now an executive at Cardinal Health. Barber told the committee about the Walgreens case. He was still pressing the industry's long-standing argument about the need for a clear legal definition of the imminent danger standard. The case had not ended up setting a precedent that undermined the standard. Rather than take the case to trial, the company agreed to settle and pay what was then a record $80 million fine. Still, Barber argued the D faced legal jeopardy. Indeed, many of my colleagues believe that the Walgreens case would have resulted in a narrowing of DES authority if the agency had not settled its dispute, Barber said. As a supporter of DES mission, I urge this committee to take legislative action that clarifies the meaning of imminent danger. D. Lyndon Barber helped design the DES aggressive enforcement campaign. When he left to work for the drug industry in 2011, he brought knowledge of the DES strategy and how it could be attacked to protect the companies. U.S. Senate. On April 21, 2015, the House took up Marino's bill. On the floor of Congress, Marino said this bill will bring much-needed clarity to critical provisions of the Controlled Substances Act. In doing so, we will ensure that the DES authorities are not abused and threatened by future legal challenges, foster greater collaboration, communication and transparency between the D and the supply chain, create more opportunities to identify bad actors at the end of the supply chain and, most importantly, be certain the prescriptions are accessible to patients in need. The House passed the bill by unanimous consent. Not one lawmaker opposed the measure. That same day, Leonhardt, who had supported R-Wis's aggressive approach, announced that she was retiring as D administrator amid reports that some of her agents had attended sex parties funded by Colombian cocaine cartels. For the industry and its supporters on Capitol Hill, the pieces were falling into place. A month later, the Justice Department named a new D chief who said he wanted to mend the rift between the agency and the drug industry. Chuck Rosenberg, former D acting administrator Chuck Rosenberg D, former chief of staff for the NFB director James B. Comey, and former U.S. attorney in Virginia and Texas before he was appointed to head the D in 2015. He resigned October 1. Was a former U.S. attorney in Virginia and Texas who had served as the chief of staff to then FBI Director James B. Comey. After Rosenberg came to the D, the agency began putting out a new message. Rosenberg wanted to paint a new face on the D for the Hill, said Regina LaBelle, the chief of staff for the White House's Office of National Drug Control Policy at the time. He wanted to show them the softer side of the D, and he wanted to work with industry. Michelle Leonhardt resigned as D administrator on April 21, 2015, amid reports that D agents had attended sex parties paid for by drug cartels. Chipsomodivillagity Images Chuck Rosenberg, who was acting administrator after Leonhardt's departure, said the agency had been slow to address the industry's concerns. Alex Brandon, Associated Press. In October 2015, one of the last remaining obstacles to the bill was removed. R-Wis was pushed aside at diversion control. With the Inspector General's investigation into his comments hanging over his head, R-Wis retired from the D after a 30-year career. The investigation went nowhere, but R-Wis said, "It destroyed me." By this time, Holder had left and Lynch was the Attorney General. Her office informed Marino that the D had met with 300 industry representatives and Justice was committed to working more closely with the drug companies. "We value these opportunities to communicate and work with our partners in the pharmaceutical industry," Kadzak, Lynch's congressional affairs chief, wrote to Marino. At the same time, the D was in negotiations with Hatchson. Orrin Hatch Root R Congress donations received from industry, 2013 June 2017 $177,000. The longest-serving Republican senator, considered a staunch ally of the pharmaceutical industry. He sponsored the Senate version of the bill, staffed to amend the bill for the Senate's consideration. The newly proposed language required the D to show that a company's conduct posed a substantial likelihood of an immediate threat of death, serious bodily harm or drug abuse before the agency could seek a suspension order. Whitlock, Hatch's spokesman, said the new language was proposed by the D. Senator Hatch has had a strong working relationship with D for his entire term of service and worked collaboratively for months with D here. Any claim that he tried to steamroll D or would ever seek to steamroll D is simply incorrect. A November 30 email from Tyson, the Justice Department Congressional Liaison Officer, to a Senate staffer shows that the D agreed to the bill with reluctance. D felt this wasn't a great solution, but was the best of the options offered to us, even if it did not fully address the concerns we had previously laid out for you, she added, according to the email, which was provided by staff of Sen. Sheldon Whitehouse Driver, one of the bill's co-sponsors. The bill would also give drug companies the opportunity to submit corrective action plans, outlines of how they were going to fix problems, before the D could sanction them. The D would be required to consider those plans before imposing penalties. How the bill that weakened the D made it through Congress and onto President Obama's desk. Congress DEA-DOJ Lobby Industry February 18, 2014 Rep. Tom Marino introduces the first version of the Ensuring Patient Access and Effective Drug Enforcement Act. April 7, 2014 After a hearing, the bill stalls in committee. April 8, 2014 Marino asks then Attorney General Eric H. Holder to meet with the drug companies. June 4, 2014 An email from a Justice Legislative Affairs officer says that the Marino bill was written by Barber. January 27, 2015 After Marino introduces a third version his bill, Congress holds a hearing. Barber is the featured witness testifying in favor of the legislation. February 12, 2015 Sen. Orrin Hatch introduces the measure in the Senate. November 30, 2015 D and Justice negotiate with Hatch's staff on language in the bill. March 17, 2016 The bill passes in the Senate. April 12, 2016 The bill passes in the House. April 19, 2016 President Obama signs the bill into law. On March 17, 2016, the Senate passed the bill by unanimous consent. On April 12, the House approved the Senate version, also by unanimous consent. The bill still needed the President's signature. Opposition from the D Justice could derail it, but the two agencies had given up the fight. The senior D official said the agency worked with Congress to improve the bill under difficult political circumstances. The agency believed earlier versions of the bill would have forced it to meet a criminal standard before issuing immediate suspension orders. The original version of the bill was unworkable, the official said. The Congressional Affairs Office at the Justice Department told the White House Office of National Drug Control Policy that it no longer objected to the bill, according to Botticelli, then chief of the office. On April 19, Obama signed the bill. The White House issued a one-page news release announcing its enactment. Marino also issued a release taking credit for the legislation. With this law, our drug enforcement agencies will have the necessary tools to address the issue of prescription drug abuse across the country. I applaud the hard work of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle in Congress and President Obama for realizing the importance of this legislation. Industry groups also thanked Obama. They agreed to work with the D to ensure that the law is implemented efficiently and effectively, said John M. Gray, chief executive of the Healthcare Distribution Alliance, which represents the nation's drug distribution companies. 2 months after Obama signed the bill, Rosenberg appeared on Capitol Hill. Hatch praised him. "I've been told the DES relationship with supply chain stakeholders has improved since you've taken the helm at D," the senator said. "I want to just say I applaud your efforts on this front." He then asked Rosenberg how he viewed the relationship between the D and the opioid industry going forward. Rosenberg said the agency had been slow to address industry's concerns and had failed to communicate with them. "The overwhelming majority, 99+%, are our allies in this thing," Rosenberg said. Illustration by Eddie Alvarez. The Washington Post photo from Istock Epilogue 2016. 197,713 deaths from prescription opioid overdoses since 2000. John Mulrooney, D. Chief Administrative Law Judge John J. Mulrooney, DOJ head of the D. Administrative Court that handles pharmaceutical cases, he wrote the Law Review article sharply critical of the new law. The Chief D. Administrative Law Judge has been documenting the falling number of immediate suspension orders against doctors, pharmacies and drug companies. That number has dropped from 65 in fiscal year 2011 to 6 so far this fiscal year, according to the D. Not a single order has targeted a distributor or manufacturer since late 2015, according to Mulrooney's reports, which were obtained under the Freedom of Information Act. Mulrooney said in his reports that the judges under him were handling so few cases at the D that they began hearing the cases of other federal agencies. In his article planned for the winter issue of the Market Law Review, Mulrooney wrote, "If it had been the intent of Congress to completely eliminate the DES ability to ever impose an immediate suspension on distributors or manufacturers, it would be difficult to conceive of a more effective vehicle for achieving that goal." Mulrooney's article also criticized the law for allowing companies to submit corrective action plans before the D could sanction them. He likened that provision to allowing bank robbers to round up and return ink-stained money and agree not to rob any more banks. The D said in a statement last week that it is still pursuing reckless doctors and rogue businesses with a wide variety of tools. "We will continue fighting the opioid crisis and continue to use all the tools at our disposal to combat this epidemic," the statement said. Since the D started to crack down on the opioid industry a decade ago, pharmaceutical companies and the law firms that represent them have hired at least 46 D officials, 32 of them directly from the division. They include 2 officials who managed day-to-day operations, the deputy director of the division, the deputy chief of operations, and 2 chiefs of policy. After nearly 30 years with the D, Matt Murphy, D of Pharmath, former chief of D Pharmaceutical Investigations under Ran Aziz. He now works as a consultant to the drug industry. Ran Aziz's lieutenant retired in 2011. He formed a drug industry consulting firm and went to work for the people he used to face across the table. Matthew Murphy, formerly of the D, recalls a meeting with the president of a drug company who put his hands up and said, "You got us. What can we do to make this right?" Murphy said he had heard the same thing from drug dealers, but the heroin and cocaine traffickers didn't have a class ring on the finger from a prestigious university. Katie Martin's bribe for the Washington Post. "I feel guilty," Murphy said in a recent interview. "Because every day a lot of people die of an opioid heroin overdose. Whether it's a pill or heroin, people die every day because of it. And it shouldn't be happening. One of the most recent departures was Jason Hadges, the senior D attorney overseeing pharmaceutical enforcement cases who, according to former agency supervisors and lawyers, had been demanding a higher standard of proof on cases. Hadges left the D in May to join the Pharmaceutical and Biotechnology Regulatory Division of Hogan Lovells, a high-powered DC law firm. He declined to comment, citing client sensitivities. In January, Mike Gill, who had served as the chief of staff to D Administrator Chuck Rosenberg, left the agency to join one of the nation's largest healthcare law firms. He declined to discuss why the D dropped its opposition to the bill at his new job. On October 1, Rosenberg, former D acting administrator Chuck Rosenberg, D former chief of staff for the NFB director James B. Comey, and former U.S. attorney in Virginia and Texas before he was appointed to head the D in 2015. He resigned October 1. Himself resigned from the D. Last December, 7 months after the bill became law. Marino's Rep. Tom Marino, RPA. Congress donations received from industry, 2013 June 2017 $92,500. President Trump's nominee to be drug czar sponsored the Ensuring Patient Access and Effective Drug Enforcement Act. Chief of Staff took a job as a lobbyist with the National Association of Chain Drug Stores. Bill Ty had served as Marino's point man on the legislation. The association was a key backer of the bill. Ty declined to comment. In July, Lyndon Barberd, a lobby pharma D lawyer who supervised cases against pharmaceutical companies, he left the agency and is now an executive at Cardinal Health, left Quiles Brady to join Cardinal Health as the company's chief regulatory attorney. After being the target of 2D enforcement actions, Cardinal had become one of the biggest backers of the bill. Marsha Blackburn, Rep. Marsha Blackburn, R. Tennessee. Congress donations received from industry, 2013 June 2017 $120,000. Co-sponsored all three versions of the Marino bill in the House, and asked for a Justice Department investigation into R-Wis, who co-sponsored the House version of the bill, received $120,000 in campaign contributions from the pharmaceutical industry. She did not respond to requests for an interview. She announced this month that she will run for the seat of Sen. Bob Corker, R. Tennessee, who is not seeking re-election. In addition to Blackburn, Marino and Hatch, the Post sought comment from the other 9 co-sponsors of the 2016 bill. Only 4 responded. A spokesman for White House said that the D could have expressed its opposition at any time. The fact that it passed the entire Senate without hearing any sort of communication that would have triggered concern of at least one senator doesn't really pass the smell test, the spokesman said. Jim Gelthoff, former program manager of the Desk Diversion Control Office in Detroit. He retired in 2015 and works as a consultant to lawyers suing